TK, TK, everybody, TK YouTube. How we doing? How we doing? All right, TK, TK, TK. All right. Well, guys, so this is like as I mentioned you earlier in class, this is the last half of what your second to last celebration is going to be on for lab. Okay, so lab 10, lab 11, as we can see here. Okay, so remember last week all brain. Okay, talking about all the brain structures, all that stuff. Okay. This week, we're talking about cranial nerves, spinal cord anatomy, and also the spinal nerve. Okay, all the spinal nerves. Okay, so 7 different learning objectives here that we want you guys to know. All right, a lot more than what there were last week, but that's okay because this is stuff that we are super capable of doing. Okay, what we want you to know is for the cranial nerves. So knowing the name, the number, the type/composition, motor, sensory, or mix, and the general function of the 12 cranial nerves. Okay. Determine which cranial nerves are assessed by standard clinical tests, which we saw with those questions. Clinician asks you to do something. Which cranial nerves the testing? Perfect example. Okay. Identify the cranial nerves on the images and the specified brain models, as we had. Identify the indicated structures of the spinal cord and the spinal nerves on the images and models. Describe how sensory and motor information travels through a spinal nerve and the spinal nerve roots. Indicate the level of the vertebral column that the spinal cord ends in adults. And lastly, list the number of pairs of spinal nerves in each region: cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacrococcygeal. All right, which we'll go over. Very, very easy. So, first thing we have here, pre-lab prep, okay? Stuff that should have been done before class, but I'm going to do it with you guys right now, okay? So what it's asking you here is just to identify the cranial nerves that, it has a description over here, whatever's going on, and then which cranial nerve is it, okay? So olfactory. Olfactory is relating to smell, okay? So the one that is strictly for smell is letter B over here. So we'll get that one plugged in. Optic is our sensory one that we use for vision, okay? So which one is a sensory that is just for vision? That is E here. That guy there. Oculomotor. It's in the name. It's referring to a nerve that is strictly for innervating the eye, but also for motor controls of the eye, okay? Now, this is where people get a little confused because, we have one cranial nerve for the eye, but we also have 2 extra, okay? So the oculomotor is the big bad one, the one that does the most of the other, 2 cranial nerves for the eye. So which one is it? So motor for eye movement. Well, this is only one muscle we're talking about here. So that's not that, okay? Motor for eye movements, pupillary constriction, and focusing. I like that one. All right, that's oculomotor right there. Does a whole lot of other stuff, okay? So moves a lot of the eye, does pupillary constriction, and also with focusing, okay? So that's the letter G. Trochlear, okay? So maybe you guys kind of heard me use my fun mnemonics that I use in class, but I use LA, okay, for abducens. So LA is for abducens, but for the trochlear, it is ST or STO, okay? So superior oblique trochlear, superior oblique trochlear, STO or SOT, okay? That is a letter I here, okay? Trigeminal has 3 branches off it. It's actually a mixed nerve. It's used for the sensation on our face when things are on our face or touching our face, and also for innervating the muscles of mastication, which is letter D here, okay? That one there. Abducens, LA. Lateral rectus, abducens. Lateral rectus, abducens, okay? Letter A here, LA. Perfect. L-A. A, there we go. Facial, all right? So, not sensation of the face, muscles of the face, okay? But it's also a mixed nerve too, okay? Because it does some stuff with salivary secretion and stuff, tears, etc. So that's this guy down here, letter K. Facial. Oh my gosh. Bad K. There we go. That's a better K. Number 8, vestibulocochlear. In the name, once again, vestibule and the cochlea. Vestibule is referring to the organs that are inside of our inner ear that are responsible for equilibrium, so balance. And then the cochlea referring to the structure that's responsible for hearing, okay? So purely sensory. Sensory for hearing and equilibrium. That is number F, or letter F, excuse me. All right. Glossopharyngeal here, number 9. This is another mixed one here, okay? So I see a couple different ones. So sensory for taste, tongue, motor, salivation, swallowing, and gagging. And then I also see a mixed for taste, GI sensations, motor, swallowing, speech, heart, lungs, GI. So glossopharyngeal only stays up in the head. Okay, it doesn't do anything with the GI. So because of that, it does sensory for taste, tongue, motor for salivation, swallowing, and gagging. That is that one right there. Okay, the one that we were just talking about, that is this guy. The vagus nerve starts up in the head and neck, and it actually innervates some of the structures and organs that are in our lower extremity. So like our lower body, abdomen, lungs, heart, all that stuff. So that's what the vagus nerve does. So we'll get those two guys out of the way. Last two, accessory. This is strictly a motor one. We have two motors left, but this one is also for helping with swallowing and also with head and neck movements, specifically with the muscles, the SCM and the upper trapezius, okay? That's accessory. And the last one here is hypoglossal, all right? It is the motor for tongue movements, hypoglossal, all right? Glossal meaning tongue, hypo meaning below, so it's the nerve that runs under the tongue, all right, and innervates the structures down there. That is letter F. Perfect. All right, well, that's it for pre-lab prep, guys, so let's scroll down. So cranial nerves, as we know, they are made up inside of the central nervous system, okay? The brain and the spinal cord communicate with the rest of the body through a series of nerves called the cranial and the spinal nerves, which make up the peripheral nervous system. Okay, so cranial nerves, all right, they come off of the CNS, but they are a part of the PNS. All right, they are peripheral nervous system bound. There are 12 of them. They emerge from the brain and innervate structures in the head and neck. But like I said earlier, the only one that goes below the neck is the vagus nerve, number 10. Okay, you have to identify them by two specific things. Okay. Those things always have to be Roman numeral, okay? Always have to have a Roman numeral in there. And then a name that describes the nerve's location or function, okay? So Roman numeral, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the name, CN, oculomotor, CN, blah, 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 whatever, okay? 3 cranial nerves are sensory nerves that are purely for sensory function. 5 are for motor. And the rest are for mixed nerves, okay, that have both sensory and motor functions. As I mentioned earlier, down here we have some mnemonics that they give you, okay? Mnemonics for the names, mnemonics for the compositions. Mnemonics for the names, okay, they all start with the first letter of what the name of the cranial nerve is. So on Old Olympus, so olfactory, optic, oculomotor, they both start with O, and it goes that way all the way down until you get to number 12. Composition is basically the exact same thing, except now you have the composition. So is it sensory, is it motor, or is it both? Okay. S, M, and B. If it's S, it's sensory. If it's M, it's motor. If it's B, it does both those functions. Okay. So that's what those are. They're labeled here respectively. Table 1 here wanted you to fill in what the composition and what the general function of these cranial nerves. Okay. I'm not going to do this because we literally just did it up here. Okay. It tells you if it's motor. Tells you if it's sensory, tells you if it's mixed or both, tells you what the names are, tells you what the functions are. So I'm not going to go through and relabel these things in this table, okay? You guys have all the answers right up there. You guys can do this on your own, all right? But what I will do, come down here, help with labeling the cranial nerves, okay? Help with labeling these guys. So what I'm not going to do is, actually, now I'll write it out. That's fine. I'll write it out. So what I'm going to do here is write out the cranial nerves. And what it wants you to try and pay attention to is if you can see these yellow lines that are kind of coming off of the brainstem here in a couple different pictures, okay? Wants you to try and identify these things. So the first one that we have here, this is going over to the ear, okay? And maybe we can see some of these nerves, actually, if we look at our model over here, okay? Maybe we can, maybe we can't. We'll try and see it. So the first one here, going into the ear, innervating 2 structures. This is the cochlea, that spiral looking one, and the vestibule is the one that has all these rings, the hoops on it, okay? So what this is pointing to is the 8th cranial nerve, CNVIII, and this is vestibulocochlear, all right? Purely for hearing and for balance. Where we would find this guy on here is if we look inside of the ear here. This is called your external auditory meatus. I'm going to hide it real quick. Because if I hide this guy, let's see if I get out of that view. Oh, there we go. So external auditory meatus right here. We can see this nerve coming right across as it will go into the external auditory meatus. It's not too good of a picture here. It kind of, when I hide the external auditory meatus, it kind of blacks out. But this is where the eighth cranial nerve would come and innervate. And you can imagine you'd have the cochlea and the vestibular structures right there. Okay, that's number 8 right there. The next one is going into the eye. All right, we have a couple of the cranial nerves of the eye here. And it's not too well defined here which ones it's going to in the eye. Maybe if we go back, we look at some of the eye structures. I picked a nervous system here. We can see a lot of the different nerves that are coming in the eye here, and it's kind of hard to see all these guys. No, that's not it either. I want to skip it except for 1 and 2, because it looks like our anatomy model is just going to get a little too down in the weeds with all the different nerves here, okay? So I want to skip it until we get to number 1 and 2. So what it wants you to see here with this picture, okay? Picture right here I'm circling. It wants you to look at all of the different nerves that are coming in and innervating different muscles of the eye. And what did I tell you about the nerves of the eye, okay? The cranial nerves of the eye. There's 3 of them, but there is one that innervates a multitude of different muscles in the eye. And that's what this one is trying to get at, okay? So what this image is trying to get at is it's trying to show you the 3rd cranial nerve, okay? That being oculomotor, okay? So CN3, oculomotor. All right, that's what it's trying to get you to see. Innervating all the different structures of the eye, all the different muscles. One down here, okay? Coming off the brainstem, 3 branches. I can see these guys, okay? I have a branch here, I have a branch here, branch here. That's 3 branches right there, okay? Tri is the name for 3 in Latin, okay? So because of that, I think that this is the 5th cranial nerve, the trigeminal. And I can also confirm that because I can see how all these branches are going and innervating the different sensory structures of the face, okay? Because remember, trigeminal works on muscles of mastication, but also for sensation over the face, okay? All right, another eye one here, okay? Comes up, innervating a muscle on the outside of the eye, okay? The outside, the lateral aspect, the lateral rectus, okay? And remember, what did I say that my mnemonics were once again, okay? So it's a cranial nerve, LA or ST. LA, referring to the lateral rectus, and that'd be the abducens. And that's what I'm seeing here. This nerve is coming, innervating the lateral rectus. So because of that, that is cranial nerve number 6 here. That is abducens, okay? Abducens there. All right. Next one here I wanted to show you guys. So this is the one I wanted to show you in specific here on the anatomy app, okay? Pointing to the cranial nerve that goes and innervates the entirety of the eye, which gives it vision, okay? This is the optic nerve, okay? In more particular, what we can see on our model over here, okay? So if we want to look and see the optic nerve, we can see where that optic chiasm would run right here, okay? So this is the optic nerve on the left and on the right. So the optic chiasm, remember, is the structure where the nerves cross, okay? So if we wanted to imagine it with these 2 things, if we wanted to continue drawing them, we can see how they would cross, okay? Because remember, the left side of the brain is interpreting what the right eye is seeing. The right side of the brain is interpreting what the left side is seeing, okay? And that's what that optic chiasm is. It's the point at which they cross. And we can imagine if we were to see these guys here crossing, that's what would happen. So if I keep this guy highlighted, I'm going to rotate it all the way around. We can see how that nerve comes right to where that eye socket is, okay, and where the eye would sit. Allows us to be able to see, allows you to be able to watch the video that you're listening or watching right now, okay? So very, very important nerve, okay? Optic. All right, next one down here. Remember, this is the only one that goes below the neck, okay? All the other ones stay up above the neck and the head. This is the only one. You can see it coming down and innervating all these different structures here, lungs, heart, GI structures, okay? This is number 10, okay? CNX vagus nerve, all right? Number 10. Scrolling down here a little bit. Another one innervating the face, but now innervating the muscles of the face, okay? Because of that, this is CN VII, number 7, the facial nerve, okay? Last one for a muscle of the eye, okay? So we did oculomotor, we did lateral rectus, now we have the last one, STO, ST, superior oblique trochlear, which is what this guy is pointing at, okay? So this is CNIV trochlear, all right? Next one here, coming off the brainstem, innervating salivary glands, some structures in the mouth for taste, and also some of the structures in the throat that we use for swallowing, okay? What this guy is cranial nerve number 9, glossopharyngeal. In the name, once again, glosso referring to the tongue, pharyngeal referring to the throat, so it's called glossopharyngeal because of that, okay? All right, scrolling up here. This one comes off of brainstem, goes only to the muscles that are underneath the tongue here, okay? Remember, if it's underneath the tongue, hypoglossal, all right? So number CNXII, hypoglossal nerve, all right? All right, next big one I wanted to show here on our anatomy app, okay? Cranial nerve here. This is actually the nose here, the internal nose structure, okay? If you remember the structure from last week, we talked about it. This is called the olfactory bulb, okay? So because of that, this is the first cranial nerve. This is the olfactory nerve, okay? And it wants you to look at the olfactory bulb, and it has all the olfactory fibers that come off of it. And remember, it pierces right through this bony landmark, okay? The bone that it pierces through is, remember, it's called the cribriform plate. It's a part of the ethmoid bone up in our brain. Remember all those weeks ago we learned about all those structures of the bone? That's the cribriform plate that the olfactory bulbs sit right upon. And that's what the fibers are punching through to go into the nasal cavity, okay? So on my model here, okay, olfactory bulbs, we had 2 of them because we had 2 nostrils, right and left. So right one here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Zoom in. I'm going to rotate my friend down here, and what we should see is those fibers coming right off of the guy here, coming right off that olfactory bulb, okay? So I'm going to keep those highlighted, and we can see how they're puncturing right through that cribriform plate here, okay? Now furthermore, I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to actually rotate my guy around, zoom into the nose a little bit, and we can see how inside of the nose we have those fibers sit right at the top, okay? Because that is how we are able to interpret smell, okay? The olfactory nerve, okay? Olfactory nerve is also really unique because it's actually one of the nerves that it's actually tied to our emotional centers in our limbic system. And also it's tied to our memory. So sometimes, maybe you're walking around, you smell something, okay? Maybe you smell whatever scent or whatever, and it makes you think, or it reminds you of someone, okay? It reminds you of something, reminds you of a place or an event in your life that happened, okay? Everyone has this capability. You'll smell something and it reminds you back to a time, or it's connected to something of emotional, either distress or eustress. So a positive memory, for example. So very, very unique nerve, okay? Very, very unique nerve. And this is probably what was knocked out if anyone had COVID. This is probably what was either knocked out or temporarily knocked out when you maybe were, smelling something or tasting something and you couldn't taste it. It was probably this guy that was knocked out. Okay. All right, last cranial nerve here. This is the last one. Okay, we can see it start. Huge one. All right, very, very big one. And it's innervating some structures, 2 different muscles. Specifically, this is the SCM, sternocleidomastoid, and this is the upper trapezius here. So this is CNXI, and this is accessory. All right. Perfect. So that there. I think I can get through this, and then we will move on to, talking about that. Let's just see what time I'm at right now. 18 minutes. Okay, yeah, we can get through this in like 7 minutes. So, zoom out. Perfect. Zoom out of my friend here. Okay. So, clinical tests. This is one of our learning objectives. So, it's going to basically give you a scenario what a clinician or someone is doing to you, okay, to try and test all your cranial nerves, okay? So, some of them have 1 answer, some of them have 4. If they have 4 or multiple, 2, 3, they're going to be numbered in the parentheses. Okay. The first one here, only 1 cranial nerve. So the clinician asks you to smile, then frown, and then whistle. Okay. Which one is this referring to? So if you're doing some muscular actions of the face, what this is referring to is the 7th cranial nerve. Okay. This would be the facial nerve here. Okay. Clinician asks you to open and close your jaw, clench your teeth. All right, what is this guy referring to? Muscles of mastication, okay? This is trigeminal here. So this is CNV, trigeminal. All right. Clinician asks you to shrug your shoulders, turn your head to the left and right. You're doing the muscle actions of the SCM and the upper trapezius. So because of that, you are doing the accessory nerve there, okay? All right, this one has a little bit of a trick to it, but the clinician draws an imaginary Z in the air with their finger and asks you to follow their finger with your eyes without moving your head. They ask you to do the same while drawing the letter H, okay? So when you're doing the letter Z, you're testing all of your eye's muscular actions, okay? So if we're doing that, we already are knocking out 3 cranial nerves that this question is asking, okay? So what we are testing here is number 3. That's oculomotor. We're testing trochlear. All right, STO, superior oblique, STO, superior oblique trochlear. We're also testing abducens, okay, number 6. LA, lateral rectus, LA, lateral rectus abducens, okay? The one that you might not think about here is this clinician is asking you to just be able to visually see what's going on, okay? It doesn't ask that really in a great way here. But if you're visually able to see that the clinician is drawing a Z and you're drawing the letter H, you're visually able to see that, it's testing your sensation of vision. So because of that, optic is that last nerve there that you might not think about. Okay, so it's kind of a trick. It didn't really give a good description of what it was testing, okay? Doctor tells you to close their eyes or your eyes for at least 1 minute. They observe what happens to your right pupil when you open your right eye. Repeat this process for the left eye. So hidden function of one of our cranial nerves, specifically one of the ones of the eye, okay? So everyone thinks about oculomotor of being one that is the powerhouse, which it is, okay? It's able to move the eye in all these crazy directions. A lot of people think it's the optic nerve that is actually allowing your eye to, constrict and focus on things, but it's actually your oculomotor nerve, okay? Your iris is a muscle. The iris is the colored part of the eye. That's a muscle, all right? Oculomotor is controlling that muscle. When you open your eye or when you're standing in the dark or something like that, it's allowing you to be able to focus on things and also to be able to open your eye to bring in more light. So that is the extra function of the oculomotor nerve, which a lot of people forget about. So don't forget it, okay? Don't forget it. Number 4, clinician places their hand on your throat and asks you to swallow and speak a few sentences, okay? So multiple ones here again, okay? Automatically, if you're speaking sentences, you're moving your tongue, okay? So let's just cross off hypoglossal right away, okay? You're speaking sentences, you're using your tongue. That's the first one there, okay? The other ones, okay? Hands on the throat ask you to swallow. 2 of them that are involved with swallowing, okay, and also with the, placing the hands on the throat, okay? Actually 3 of them, I should say. The other 3 that are involved in this process is the vagus nerve, number 10, all right? Number 9, glossopharyngeal, and also accessory, believe it or not, okay? Number 11, accessory. Hidden function, once again, of accessory. A lot of people think that it's just, the muscles for upper trapezius, SCM, but it also helps with swallowing, okay? Believe it or not. Has that hidden function right there. Number 7, clinician tells you to protrude your tongue and then looks for abnormal deviation of movement. So you're moving your tongue here. What are you doing? You're using your hypoglossal, all right? Clinician has you stand several feet from a standard eye chart and asks you to read the smallest line of the letters you can clearly see. So purely testing your vision here, okay? So nothing related to, what do you, can you move your eyes in a certain direction? It's just purely asking you to be able to, can you read what's on the eye chart here? So this is the optic nerve here, okay? All right. Clinician strikes a tuning fork on the heel of their shoe. They touch the stem to the top of your head along your mid-sagittal line. Ask if you can hear the vibrations better in one ear and then both ears. So hearing, vestibular, cochlear. Okay, this is number 8. Vestibulocochlear. Specifically testing the cochlear part. Okay, and the same thing here. Standing with your eyes closed, arms at the sides for several seconds. They are able to see if you're able to stay balanced. It's the exact same answer as the last one, except now you are testing primarily the vestibular part, okay, of the nerve. Clinician holds a vial of scented liquid under your nose and asks you to identify the substance by the scent. So, purely the sensation of smell. This one is the first nerve, first cranial nerve, olfactory. Clinician places a drop of sugar solution, on your tongue and asks if you can taste it. They repeat this process with a drop of salt solution. So, there are 3 cranial nerves that are responsible for taste, okay? And those guys are facial, okay? Facial is one of them. VII. It is differed based on the regions of the tongue. So I think from my recollection, it's like the first third, the second third, and the third third. there's different cranial nerves of the three that we're about to list here that innervate those different areas. So that's how it's divided up. So facial, number 7. We have glossopharyngeal, that is IX, number 9, and then vagus, number 10. Okay. All right, so that's it for the first couple parts of the video here. So I'm gonna pause it here, or I'm gonna come back. We're gonna talk about how to identify these cranial nerves on the model. Actually, yeah, I'm gonna come back. We're gonna talk about how we can find the cranial nerves on the model here in a very, very easy way. Okay, so we're gonna do that, and then we'll talk about the spinal cord anatomy. That'll be that. Okay. All right, guys. We'll be back in a second.